For the last segment of today's conference, we will have a panel discussion on strengthening cybersecurity awareness to defend against the increased cyber threat. We would like to invite our speakers back on stage. Our moderator, Mr. Tony Low, our panelists, Mr. Alvin Teo, Mr. Thomas Wee, Mr. Charles Lim, Mr. Andrew Moe.
We come to the last segment of the section today. Thank you for all the presenters who came, and thank you for the audience who are still here following through the discussion today. I think first thing first, I want to thank all the presenters here for making the effort to present in this session, and on behalf of AISP as well. It was actually, what I see in the sessions today is very interesting. We have a diverse topic. We talk about when we talk about email security right from the start, and we end off with Andrew as looking at it on a holistic but in simplification way. I think my very first question is across the board, because what I notice is a lot of the webinars that I run with SMEs, the primary operating business tool is email, right? So and there are different kind of SMEs around who has been around for a long time. Like Andrew mentioned, first when they started, they have bought all these fancy tools, and they continue to run for the next year. How do we help this kind of SMEs today to tell them that there's all this necessary threat that needs to change, and these are they need to recognize some of this threat. Maybe I start out with Thomas in terms of because we do have two worlds, right? One is they are running on a traditional stack. The other one, they are running on like a cloud provider. They say everything is there already. Why do I need to do more?
Okay, simple. I think most of the SME today, unlike probably if you are started in the good old days where computing world started, I presume you heard about Exchange 5, Exchange 5.5, the email platform, right? So over time, you should have evolved probably into Exchange 2013, Exchange 2016, or probably you have migrated your email platform to the cloud. Now, the Microsoft approach today in business, okay, like you running your own business, they will like you to move to the cloud platform rather than you do the on-prem deployment. The benefit is great because you leverage on the Microsoft team, the expert, to run and upgrade your mail platform daily. Whereas if you are doing the on-prem exchange, you need your own resources, you need to buy your own server, you need to buy your own perimeter defense, your secure ID applications, your Fortinet firewall, etc., okay, or your monitoring applications, all right, in order to keep your system secure. But when you pay a flat fee, subscribe to Microsoft platform in 365, Microsoft 365 email platform, you are actually more safer. All right. No doubt, Microsoft provide a basic email protection services, but that is very basic. Unless you are very big SME, you have about probably 1,000 email accounts, then probably you get an E5 license, you have a more comprehensive email protection, okay, modules inside the Microsoft 365. Otherwise, if you are on the normal like Microsoft Exchange Online, your E1, your E3 plan, you only get a basic. So the basic will not able to defend you against like impersonation attack, business email compromise, advanced level phishing, okay, as well as some advanced zero-day malware protection. So you rely on us, like Green Radar, a third-party email platform provider who actually do nothing but is just to scan your email and protect your email from all the malicious threats, impersonation attack, as well as email compromise attack. Right? Hope I answered your question on that. Yep.
Yeah, that answers. And actually, I have a follow-on question for Charles as well, right? So because email being an email, there's always this gate in terms of ID protection. What more should they start to do? Is it just MFA? Is it just passwordless? Is there anything more in terms of identity side that they need to implement? The reason why I'm looking about email is actually 80% of what SME does today is email business ops, in short.
True. So totally great question, right? So email has always been primary because, I mean, this, as you say, 80% of what they do is on email. But I think over the years, there has been a significant shift of people not just looking at the emails, because there's also the operation side, really what we call the operational technology side, right? Which is really your production lines, the machines that run your production lines. Don't forget, those are still Windows machines. Those does not rework on emails, right? Again, then how do you protect that? So I think what my recommendation to a lot of the SMEs is to really look at your environmental holistically and not just a subset of what you use in terms of on your daily basis or from an operational basis. And then from there, once you have identified what your holistic environment looks like, then put in the necessary measures in place to protect the necessary, right? So it may be emails, it may be credentials, it may be monitoring, whatever it may be, but it always has to be driven from the business. It cannot be driven from the security side, right? So that would be my.
Which actually you can provide a good segue, right? So business, as the business start to digitize, they tend to rush into acquiring capability. And the number one thing that they do is I will do a shopping list in the marketplace and look, this is a SaaS, it's easy, I just create account. What will be what should they look out for? How should they make it more holistic, to your point, in terms of identity management?
So identity has been a big topic over the last 2 years, and you've seen it, especially with the pandemic, right? And you're right, many organizations and SMEs during the start of the pandemic has rushed in embarking on the SaaS platforms, right? Be whether it's Salesforce or CRM or whatever it may be. Over the last a year or so, many of the SMEs has started retracting and started looking at things more holistically and say, hey, you know what? Maybe my adoption of the SaaS was a bit too rushed because I was in panic mode at the time. And it may not be the best level of security that they provide for me. So now I am then looking, a lot of the organizations should then be looking at, okay, if I have the SaaS platform in place and I have whatever email systems and whatever on-prem systems in place, I need a platform to be holistically encompassing and controlling all my credentials and accesses across the board, right? Regardless of where the systems lie. Yeah.
Okay, so that means they have to kind of stop, think, review, yes, and then just move forward.
Yeah, they have to take a stock take.
Yeah.
And many organizations are today taking the time to do a stock take. Yeah.
Okay, I think my follow-up question would be for Andrew, right? So assuming, as what the organization says, they have heavily invested in SaaS and cloud, and they actually rush into it, and they realize, okay, they realize that password is scattered. But the thing is, what goes out is not only the password, right? And you mentioned your presentation earlier is there's this firewall, and because things is going out of the enterprise more, because what they should be looking out for in terms of what more should they be doing in this posture where a lot more information is actually going out from the enterprise, a lot more traffic is actually expected to come in. How would you advise them?
I think we are looking at two things, right?
Yep.
I think the first part, I think we typically talk about is the enforcement point, right? It's because of the very, very distributed nature of where all the users are, where all the applications, where all your data are, right? So again, goes back to the I love this word, the accidental multi-cloud users. They suddenly have so many places that they themselves lose track, right? Where are all the assets actually they are? And individual, they have an enforcement point just right in front of the gate, right? Your PC, you can actually, is an enforcement point, it's a perimeter by itself, right? And all these are good and is necessary to have. That brings me to the other part of things, right? Which is you have a distributed enforcement point, but coming back, let's have a centralized data point for all the users as well as all your policies, right? Some of the things you will need to kind of aggregate back together, so it is possible for the administrators or for the security guys to actually define policies, right? And you also need to have some form of centralized monitoring, right? That all the different visibility points and enforcement points will report back so that you can have an end-to-end, I don't like to use the word single pane of glass, but I think that is the ideal that we are moving to. You can see all the attacks that are coming in, something flashing red, something that you need to take action on, something green is okay to go. I think we need to have some form of centralized management for us to make sense, for us to be sane about how we manage the network, how we manage the resources for the long term.
Okay, so your point is actually, first thing first is really understand, do a quick stock take in terms of where they are, what they're doing and using. Yeah. Hopefully try and really stitch it back to you coined, right, the single pane of glass to understand, and also using that as an actionable entry point, right, in terms of addressing. So I guess the next question I want to kind of divert it to Alvin. Alvin, in terms of, you see, we talk about email as a business operation. As business start to digitize, they look at SaaS. And pandemic has actually created another dimension. People are working anywhere, everywhere, anytime. In terms of your view from an endpoint, because the laptop, I think Charles and Andrew also mentioned, right? This device that actually we're using multiple devices. How do SMEs look at it from a perspective of one? We used to have managed devices. Now we are looking into BYOD, right? Is it something that SMEs should be encouraged to do it, and how should they do it safely?
Okay, so I think there needs to be two approaches to this. With the rise of BYOD, which I'll tackle first, end users definitely, I would say, prefer the convenience. And with work from home, it's becoming increasingly hard to differentiate between your personal and your work life, especially on your devices. So the first step to tackling it, I would say, is to get your employees' cyber hygiene, to bring it up, or at least try and boost it somewhat. Although it might seem like a chore to them, letting them learn about how to spot phishing attacks, letting them know how that they should avoid, very suspicious-looking websites should be a very first step. Because no matter how good your security is, threats are always evolving, and one day somebody will develop something that might bypass certain solutions, and the human factor plays a very important part in that. So that's the first one. The second way I will approach that is, even though you have multiple BYODs inside your environment, probably the safest thing, as what both Charles and Andrew and Thomas has elaborated, is to make sure that first, your identity access is secure. Make sure that your access control to sensitive documents is also in place, and also lastly, bank on the zero trust methodology as much as you can, because someone who's doing the day-to-day operations does not need to see the financial reports for that, especially as you use more cloud storages and things like that. Yeah.
Okay. The follow-on question is, because work from home, right? We are connecting with using our home network, and is that a concern in your view? because you have my own router that runs for 5 years.
Okay,
And
so
that router doesn't change. I have the standard password. Is it a concern for SMEs if they have staff working in that?
I would say that is actually a slightly trickier, trickier question.
Sorry, I put it in
No
the
worries,
spot.
no worries. There are, of course, more IT-savvy home users who know how to update their router firmwares at least, and then the majority of them are those, maybe you sign to ISP, you get the router, you don't touch it until it breaks, basically. In terms of concern, I wouldn't say it's severe. As long as I bring back to the 2 points, as long as you teach them basic cybersecurity hygiene, and you get the endpoint and you get their accesses controlled as well, because the reality of it is the hackers around the world aren't going to target you just because it's you. Most of these breaches happens because of you're working from home, and your attention span might not be what it is as compared to somewhere more formal. And you might randomly click a few links, jump through, read a few articles, and that's where you end up in the wrong side of the internet, and that's how the breach would usually happen.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think that means in short, as long as we have some form of hygiene, I think that's probably a lesser of a problem to look at.
Yes, correct.
Because I got this question a lot of times during the webinars that some of the tough case when they say they bring, actually allowing, so they're actually quite concerned about losing control. I think this is the right word. They are losing control in terms of not controlling the staff devices. I think a follow-on question, actually, we heard about in this session, even outside this session, but in this session we'll talk about zero trust, right? But is it something that a strategy that SME should look at with the landscape that is changing today, especially the application landscape? Is this something considered daunting, or is it something that they can look forward to? Is there a recipe, so to speak, right? Maybe I'll start off with Alvin yourself. You mentioned this.
Okay, sure. So in terms of, I wouldn't call it a recipe. What I would call it would be close to a process or framework instead. Zero trust might sound daunting to a lot of SMEs. It might sound daunting to even IT departments from time to time. But the truth of the matter is, zero trust, I believe, is just a set of processes. As long as management and IT department are able to see eye to eye on certain processes, that should be the starting foundation where IT department asks the management department or the other way around. Does this person really need access to files ABC or to this part of the shared folder, for example? And that actually will kick off the process naturally, where they will look at different things, how to assign value to the assets, how to gauge the exposure and things like that.
Okay, thanks. I think you touched a very interesting point, ID, right? So then I will push back to Charles, right? So what would be a good hygiene to look at in terms of ID management, right? The concept of joint management leave. Right? How is it very radically different for zero trust? Is it just more of tightening so that we can start off that journey, Charles?
Yeah, so Tony, great question, because I get these questions from a lot of SMEs all the time, right? Do tightening of accesses mean that I'm safer? Not necessarily. And I think the most important point that I'd like the SMEs to take away, when adopting a zero trust strategy, the first thing to look at is really around those processes and policies, right? Like Alvin mentioned. So, because a lot of it is really driven by policies. If you don't want certain types of employees accessing certain types of data, then the subsequent technology solutions should be able to then support those access controls accordingly, right? But first, the policy needs to be in place. And to adopt that policy, it's not going to cost you a lot, right? Because it's really just going to be a stock take of those policies. Then subsequently is the introduction of those really the cyber solutions and the identity controls. So once you have an understanding of those policies, then it's always easier to say, okay, where do you loosen those controls? Where do you tighten those controls, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So that will be my recommendation around identity and access.
Okay, so then I'll move on. Okay, so in terms of Andrew, when you, in your discussion, in your presentation, you talk about, and earlier you mentioned the single pane of glass, right? So that means the operation side of it. Is it considered like is it because as long as you simplify, you kind of share legacy and try and make it unified? Is that a journey to take in terms of the zero trust infrastructure, so to speak?
Yeah, I want to go back, just take one step back. Why zero trust? It's not a new term. The term has been around for roughly 10 years, all right? It's an approach, it's a philosophy. I think we can put in different words. But I think there's one very contrasting problem that we are trying to solve if we use zero trust properly, right? Which is actually to kind of like remove the mindset of implicit trust. It means trust everything, right? I think this has been all, I think the technology arena has started off very trusting. We don't need to authenticate. I just know that I'm connecting to this server, I'm allowed access, I do what I want, all right? Now, when we implement zero trust, I think I have to use the words more commonly used terminologies that the analysts use, right? We have zero trust, and then actually we have zero trust access, right? So zero trust access is a bit about, it's about knowing who you are, validating who you are, so on and so forth. And there's actually even one more umbrella that's actually right below. It's called ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access. Right? That is kind of like, it's more from the endpoint perspective. How do you tie down the automatic VPN, right? It's actually the wrong word to use. ZTNA is kind of more marketed as the next generation VPN. How do you fire up your PC and immediately you get connected wherever you are in the world, right? So that one is the ideal state. How do you do that? I think we have still some way to go. Technology is already there.
Yep.
Right? And most of the technology are not brand new technology, but we have better line up the technology and integrate them so that these are all possible. Right? And ultimately, it's not only to just access a VPN to the company, but accessing individual resources. We control about individual resources, which SME may not prioritize this in day one.
Agree.
So you can get back everything together. I think that is a better way that SMEs can more readily apply zero trust and zero trust access as a whole. And so it's about making SME, giving them a way that they can adopt it more.
I think
easily.
I want to add on to, I know we are lack of time, but I want to add one in terms of zero trust. It's not implicit for all systems as well. There's also time to time that the access needs to be elevated before you get access to that particular system. Because I myself, I work in a company that has something like that, and it's not 100% zero trust. I want to kind of make this statement to the audience here. Zero trust does not mean all systems, and it's not for everyone. In terms of within the organization, there's differentiation that still need to be in place to outside this zero trust. So I would just want to, okay, I have one last question for Thomas. It's actually, because we talk about zero trust here, it's all about system, right? Email today has become the centerpiece. It's not just getting emails. The email system now actually triggers in applications, right? So how would you vision in terms of, if we talk about having accesses, tightening, does email plays a very important role today with, on top of just receiving a note?
Okay, good question. Now, in today's, we do have a lot of cloud applications, right? Many people use software as a services. Okay, government give a lot of funding to ask you to use the cloud finance system, cloud CRM system. Am I right? Now, all these systems, they will enable you to integrate the communication, okay, towards your email. All right, so it's easier, right? For example, you receive a sales from your online e-commerce, all right? And your online e-commerce will trigger an email to send the order form to your email, right? So to tie it down, like to have a zero trust access, all right? Okay, we will not, like what Andrew mentioned, all right? You should be a trust, implicitly trust, all right? As long as you know these cloud services is subscribed by your company, right? And with your email security products in place, which you need to leverage on the email communication. So generally, on that aspect, you need to get your email security applications, be it a cloud, be it on-premise, okay, to whitelist the cloud services IP addresses. So if you talk to your cloud services provider, they will provide you a list of IP addresses for you to whitelist. And you should, all right, accept the communication for the particular IP addresses. So that if any other try to use other IP addresses to spoof into the system, all right, your system should configure to drop the communication. So in this way, you are actually secure the channel between your cloud services platform together with your email communication platform. Okay.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Thanks the panel. Thanks the panel for answering the question. And with that, we will end the panel discussion today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
everyone.
Stay
Thanks.
safe.